I'm not opening that damn door, Nicole. I'm done cleaning up after this town's cruelty. Jack's voice was rough, louder than it needed to be, his hand trembling slightly as he set his mug down on the table. Nicole didn't flinch. She stood by the window, staring at the shadow just beyond the porch light. The rain had started 20 minutes ago, cold and relentless, and still, the shape hadn't moved. Just a dog, barely more than a silhouette, soaked and silent, but not alone. There's Pups with her, Nicole said quietly. Jack scoffed, shaking his head. Even more reason to leave it. That's not our problem anymore. Nicole turned to him slowly. You buried our dog 6 weeks ago, Jack, and you haven't cried once. His jaw tightened. He hated when she did that, spoke the truth so plainly. He looked away. She stepped toward the door, but Jack rose to block her. We are not bringing another one in. We did everything right with Dakota, and she still died in my arms. I'm not doing that again. It's not about doing it again, Nicole said. It's about not turning away. Jack looked at her like she had betrayed him just by caring. But behind the frustration, behind the grief that still hadn't found a place to land, he was afraid. Afraid of starting over, afraid of healing, afraid of letting anything fragile near him again. Outside, thunder cracked. Nicole flinched, but only slightly. She turned the knob. The door opened slowly, the porch light illuminating the figures just beyond the railing. A German shepherd stood stiffly, ears pinned back, coat soaked to her bones. She didn't move when the door opened. She didn't approach. She just froze, at her feet. 2 tiny pups lay curled into the space beneath her, shivering but silent. Nicole stepped out onto the porch slowly, her voice calm. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Still, the mother didn't move. Her body trembled, not from cold but from decision. Trust had nearly been killed in her, and yet something had made her come this far. She had chosen a doorstep. She had chosen a door. And now she waited. Jack stood frozen in the hallway, watching the scene with wide, unreadable eyes. Nicole knelt, extending her hand. They won't survive the night out here. The mother took one slow step forward, her head lowered. Her eyes met Nicole's, and there was no mistaking the expression in them. Not fear, not hope, just exhaustion. Jack couldn't take it anymore. He muttered something under his breath and stormed into the kitchen. But he didn't close the door, and Nicole knew that was his answer. She lifted the smallest pup gently, cradling it against her chest. The mother didn't growl. She only watched, then followed, step by cautious step, as Nicole carried both pups inside later. After towels and warm broth and silence that felt more like prayer than anything else, Jack stood in the doorway again. The German shepherd lay curled on a blanket in the corner, her body curled tightly around her pups. Nicole sat nearby, just watching. She chose our door, Jack said finally. Nicole nodded, and we chose not to close it. Neither said more that night, but something had shifted, because sometimes the most fragile things don't need saving. They just need someone to open the door. The house was unusually quiet the next morning, not the kind of silence that follows sleep, but the heavy stillness of something new, something sacred, settling into the bones of a place. Nicole moved through the kitchen softly, barefoot and deliberate, careful not to startle the guests resting. Just a few feet away, the mother shepherd, now dry but clearly still on edge, lay curled on an old comforter in the corner of the living room. Her eyes tracked every movement, not with suspicion, but with weary vigilance. The 2 pups nestled against her side stirred only when she nudged them to feed, their tiny bodies twitching in sleep. Jack stood near the hallway, arms crossed, watching from a distance. He hadn't said much since Nicole had brought them inside. His coffee sat untouched on the counter. Something about the sight of that mother dog, so still, so present, so quiet in her devotion, unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. She didn't sleep all night, Nicole said softly, not looking at him. Not really. Every time I moved, she lifted her head. She's scared to let go. Jack let out a long breath. I know the feeling. Nicole finally turned to him. I don't think she came here by accident. You think a half-starved dog with newborns just chose our house, he replied, with a flicker of sarcasm that didn't quite land. She didn't scratch, she didn't bark, she didn't whine. She just stood there, in the rain, like she was waiting for permission to survive. Jack rubbed his face, the stubble coarse beneath his fingers. He didn't want to talk about meaning or fate or second chances. But as he looked at the shepherd, her ribs still visible, her eyes older than they should be, he couldn't shake the feeling that something in her mirrored something in him, a quiet surrender, a last reach for help that had nothing left behind. Nicole knelt by the dog again and gently slid a bowl of warm broth closer. The shepherd didn't touch it at first, but when Nicole stepped back and sat silently, the dog slowly leaned forward, lapping at the liquid like it cost her nothing. And everything. Later that afternoon, the vet came. Nicole had called her that morning, not for treatment, just for guidance. Dr. Aaron Sanchez was used to rescues, and when she saw the state of the shepherd, she crouched without hesitation. She's malnourished, Aaron said gently, running her hand along the dog's flank. But she's strong. She made a choice to live. She just didn't know if she'd be allowed to. Jack stood near the fireplace, arms still folded, and the pups. Aaron smiled, hungry but healthy. She's been keeping them alive at the cost of herself. Nicole looked down at the dog, something tightening in her chest. Do dogs do that? Just give everything without knowing if they'll survive it? Aaron nodded. More often than people do. After Aaron left, Jack stepped outside. He didn't go far, just to the edge of the porch. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of damp earth. He lit a cigarette but didn't smoke it, letting it burn between his fingers while the memories rose like steam off the grass. Lucy had died in that same corner a year ago. Old age, the vet had said, but it wasn't just time that took her. It was the slow decline, the quiet goodbyes in her eyes, and the way Jack had knelt beside her, helpless. He had sworn then never again. No more rescues. No more attachments. No more being the last thing something innocent saw before it left the world. But now there was this dog, this quiet, waiting, breathing animal who had dragged herself through the storm to a porch light that still flickered because he hadn't bothered to fix it. He turned around and looked through the window. Nicole sat on the floor, the shepherd's head now resting in her lap, her hand moving gently across fur that it had started to soften. The pups were asleep, their tiny bellies rising and falling in rhythm. Jack stubbed the cigarette out on the railing. That night, as Nicole pulled the extra blanket over the three of them, Jack brought in a second comforter and laid it beside the first. For me? Nicole asked with a smile. Jack shook his head no. For her, so she knows she's not alone in the room. Nicole didn't speak. She didn't have to, because sometimes opening the door is just the beginning. The real choice is staying close enough. When someone terrified of love finally lets their guard down. The wind shifted the following day, bringing with it the dry bite of colder weather. Nicole stood at the edge of the porch, mug in hand, watching the trees bend slightly in the distance. Behind her, inside the house, the German shepherd still lay curled around her pups like she was holding the last two pieces of her world together. She hadn't left the corner of the living room except to eat, and even then, only when Nicole gently coaxed her with soft words and a hand that never forced. Only offered. Jack emerged from the shed with a tarp under one arm and a bucket of gravel in the other. Storm's picking up, supposed to freeze tonight. His voice was matter of fact, but it carried a different weight, now less resistance, more presence. He didn't meet Nicole's eyes as he set the supplies down. I can rig something over the windows, keep the cold from seeping in too deep. Nicole nodded. That would help. They stood in silence for a moment, until a faint yelp broke the air. Nicole turned first, rushing back inside. Jack followed close behind, heart pounding, unsure of what he'd find. The mother had risen suddenly, standing stiffly over the pups. One of them had rolled awkwardly onto its back, whimpering and kicking its legs as if in pain. Nicole scooped him up gently, cradling him in her hands. He was the smaller of the two, black fur with a white spot on his chest, barely the size of a curled fist. His breathing was shallow, lips trembling as he let out another soft, panicked cry. "Something's wrong," Nicole said, her voice thin with panic. "He was fine this morning." Jack stepped closer, his expression tight. "Is he choking?" "No," she said quickly. "No food yet. Just nursing. It's something else." She looked toward the mother, whose body trembled visibly now. Her eyes weren't on the pup, they were on Nicole. Not in fear, something else, desperation, helplessness. They rushed the pup to the car, the mother watching from the window unmoving as Nicole held her hand to the glass for a second before leaving. The vet's clinic was 20 minutes out, every second of the drive heavy with the sound of the pup's fading cries. Nicole didn't speak. Jack drove like the road was breaking beneath them. At the clinic, Dr. Sanchez met them at the door. "He's hypothermic," she said quickly after examining him. "Weak heart, probably a congenital defect. But you brought him just in time." They stayed at the clinic for over an hour, pacing the small waiting room, surrounded by the scent of antiseptic and the low murmur of phones and footsteps. Nicole kept her arms folded tightly around herself like she was trying to keep the rest of the world out. Jack didn't pace. He stood still, staring at the door to the exam room. He had seen too many doors like that in his life, doors that decided whether someone would return or not. Dr. Sanchez finally stepped out, her smile faint but reassuring. "He's warming up, still weak, but he's nursing again." Nicole let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Jack reached out, resting a hand on her back. "He made it for now," the vet said. "But it's going to be a fight. He'll need to be monitored, fed every 2 hours, and he can't be returned to the cold." When they returned home that evening, Nicole walked straight inside, cradling the pup in a thick blanket. The mother shepherd stood as they entered, tense but quiet. Nicole knelt beside her, slowly placing the pup back at her side. The mother leaned in, nuzzling him gently, then curled herself tighter around both pups. Jack stood near the doorway, watching the way she moved, how every action was both instinct and prayer. He finally walked over, knelt beside Nicole, and reached toward the mother. She looked at him, didn't blink, didn't pull away. "You can stop holding the world alone," Jack whispered. "We're here now." Nicole looked at him, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and something else, something closer to gratitude. That night, they rearranged the living room, brought down the spare mattress, rolled out extra rugs. Jack built a small barrier from Old Baby, Gates around the fireplace, and in that warm circle of borrowed hope and stubborn survival, 3 humans and 3 dogs, 1 mother. 2 fragile pups breathed together under one roof. Learning again what it meant to fight for something not because it was easy, but because it mattered. The following morning brought a fragile kind of calm, the kind that clings to the corners of a house that has seen too much in too little time. The smaller pup, now affectionately called Milo, slept pressed against his mother's side, his breathing still shallow but steady. The stronger sibling, whom Nicole had started calling Scout, had begun toddling around the edges of the barrier, nose twitching, legs clumsy but determined. The mother, still unnamed, remained alert and curled protectively around her tiny family, eyes following every movement with unwavering focus. She hadn't made a sound in days, but her silence spoke volumes. Jack stood by the fireplace watching Nicole warm a bottle on the stove. She'd slept in 2-hour shifts, waking through the night to check on Milo, feed him, cradle him when his body trembled too hard. Her eyes were heavy, movements slower than usual, but her expression never wavered. She was tethered to those pups now, as if caring for them had rewired her bones. Jack hadn't tried to stop her. He couldn't. Something in her had opened when they brought that dog inside, something that hadn't stirred since Lucy's final days. And truthfully, something in him had too. As Nicole approached with a bottle, Milo stirred slightly, a faint squeak slipping from his mouth. The mother shepherd lifted her head, ears tilting. She didn't growl when Nicole reached over the blanket and lifted him. She simply watched, exhausted and trusting, as if she had finally handed the weight of survival to someone else, if only for a little while. He made it through the night, Nicole whispered, feeding him 1 drop at a time. He's trying. Jack sat beside her, nodding. So are we. They took turns that day. Nicole fed, Jack cleaned. Scout was curious and lively, pawing at Jack's shoelaces, nosing through the old toy bin that hadn't been touched since Lucy passed. He found a cracked tennis ball and nudged it toward Jack's knee. Jack froze. For a moment his throat closed up, memory crashing through him like a wave. He picked up the ball slowly, staring at the faded chew marks, the strands of loose rubber. He hadn't touched it since the day Lucy dropped it at his feet, tail wagging weakly, just hours before she faded away. Nicole saw the shift in him and came to sit beside him. She didn't speak. She just placed a hand gently on his back. I forgot we kept this, Jack said quietly. I didn't, Nicole replied. I just couldn't bring myself to throw it out. Jack tossed the ball gently. Scout chased after it, more tumbling than running, bumping into the side of the couch and landing on his belly. He looked up, confused but undeterred, and gave a tiny bark, his first. Jack laughed, the sound catching in his chest. That's the sound of someone learning to belong, he said, voice rough with emotion. Late that afternoon, clouds began to roll in. The sky darkened earlier than usual, and the temperature dropped. Jack prepped firewood, built a small fire, and carefully arranged the blankets closer to the warmth. The mother shepherd watched him the entire time, her eyes softer now, her body less tense. She shifted slightly to let the pups nestle against her belly, her front paw resting protectively across Milo. He whimpered once, and she licked his forehead, with a tenderness that made Nicole's throat ache. But just as dusk fell, the tension returned. It was subtle at first, Scout hiding under the blanket, the mother's ears twitching with every gust of wind. Then came the sound that made Nicole freeze, tires on gravel. A car slow closed. Jack stood instantly, stepping to the window. A white truck idled at the edge of the driveway. A man got out, broad-shouldered, unfamiliar. Nicole's stomach dropped. Do you think stay with them? Jack said, already moving toward the door. He stepped out into the cold, heart pounding. The man looked up, hesitating before speaking. Sorry to bother you. I was told a stray shepherd and some pups might have been seen out here. He glanced past Jack toward the house. I lost my dog a few weeks back. She had just given birth, got spooked and ran. Jack didn't respond immediately. His thoughts raced. He should have felt suspicion, but something about the man's face stopped him. Not entitlement, not anger, just grief, raw and bone deep. She's inside, Jack said finally. But she hasn't spoken since she got here. She's barely eaten. She's scared out of her mind. The man's shoulders dropped. She's been through worse than I can imagine, but she always comes back. Jack paused, then opened the door wider. Then let's see if she remembers you. The moment the man stepped into the room, the shepherd froze. Her eyes widened, her ears lifted slowly. Uncertainly, Scout whimpered. Milo shifted against her side. Then, in a single breathless second, she stood, legs weak but steady, and took 1 step forward. Then another. She didn't run. She walked, and gently. She placed her head against the man's chest, not out of fear but homecoming. The room felt completely still in that moment. Quiet, not with fear but with recognition. The shepherd pressed her head deeper into the man's chest, and he dropped to his knees without hesitation, arms wrapping around her like he was trying to piece himself back together. Nicole watched from the corner, heart aching with something hard to name. Jack stood behind her, his hands at his sides, unsure if he should speak or step away, but no one moved. No one needed to. The man whispered her name, Layla, and for the first time since she had arrived, the shepherd's tail gave the faintest thump against the floor. Scout let out a curious yip, and Milo stirred gently in the nest of blankets. Layla turned, licking them both softly, then looked back at the man. It was as if she was saying, "See, I kept them alive. I did it." And her voice shaking, eyes full, replied, "Simply, I know. You always do." Nicole moved slowly toward him. "You said she ran after giving birth." He nodded, not taking his eyes off her. "The fireworks. They went off early. Some neighbor. She spooked, tore through the fence, took the pups with her. I searched for days. I thought I lost her for good. She nearly didn't make it," Nicole said softly. "They were on our porch during a storm. She wouldn't even look up when we opened the door." The man's throat worked hard as he blinked back tears. "She came here because she knew someone would open it." Jack, still watching from the doorway, finally spoke. "You must have done something right for her to believe that." It was late when the man finally stood to leave Layla at his side. Both pups bundled in a warm blanket that Nicole had folded herself. They'd promised to stay in touch. The man Daniel insisted on it. He thanked them over and over, but Nicole only shook her head. "She's the one who kept them alive," she said. "We just gave her the space to rest." As the door closed behind them, the house felt suddenly empty. Nicole stood in the center of the room, eyes drifting to the fireplace, the extra bedding, the bowl that would no longer be filled. She let out a slow breath, her hands clasped in front of her chest. Jack moved beside her. "You okay?" she nodded. "I think so. It's just, I didn't expect to miss her so fast." Jack slipped an arm around her shoulders. "That's what happens when someone broken still finds a way to trust you. It makes you see yourself differently." They sat down on the couch, the fire casting soft shadows across the floor. Neither spoke for a while. They didn't need to. The silence between them was different now, no longer filled with loss, but with what had grown from it. And as they sat there, the wind shifting gently against the windows, Jack reached over and took her hand. "She didn't need us forever," Nicole whispered, "just long enough to believe again." Jack nodded. That was enough to change everything. Outside, the night was still, but inside that little house, something had been mended, not completely, not perfectly, but honestly, the kind of healing that doesn't erase what came before, but wraps it in something new. And in the quiet that followed, Nicole smiled, knowing this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of remembering that every door we open, every broken soul we welcome in has the power to unlock something in us. Because sometimes saving a life doesn't mean keeping it forever. It means loving it just long enough to help it find its way home.